Hi friends, I just got done watching a video from Shad, and it was called I Spit on Your Sword, I believe, and there was a follow-up video done by Matthew Jensen, and it was also good. I'm going to put a link to in the description to both of those videos, and they're really worth watching. They have some really great points, and I just wanted to add my 2 cents to it. They cover a wide range of topics. I'm not going to get into the minutia on any of them in too great a detail, but the core of what Shad discussed, and he covered a whole bunch of different things, but the core of what he was discussing, I think, bears repeating because it's very important. Now, everyone, if you're on my channel, you're probably into swords. I'm a huge sword nerd, and everyone here probably is interested in swords and history and military and warfare and the like. And this subculture, this group of us who are into swords, is just as likely to fall prey to some of the trappings of any other type of subculture or fandom. And it's very easy to get very defensive and very invested in it, and it starts to become your own personality. And a big part of what Shad was discussing is making sure that whenever you're discussing it, either within the group or with other people who are just starting to get into, let's say, in this case, swords. So if you want to discuss the topic of swords, it's very important that we approach any type of a discussion with maturity and consideration to whoever it is that you're talking to, because it's very easy to alienate, estrange, just get the other person very upset and riled up for no reason at all. Pedantry is very easy to engage in. I'm a huge pedant because I love getting into the minutiae and all the details around whatever topic I'm studying. And that's fine if everyone who I'm dialoguing with is just as interested in it. It doesn't help anyone at all if I'm going to talk about the finer points of Eurasian steppe sabers and, distinguish between Kipchak sabers from Cuman sabers for someone who's just entering the world of swords and can't tell the difference between a Roman sword and a later medieval period sword. It's meaningless at that point. And so whenever you're talking with someone and you see their sword or you see what they're interested in, take a break. Don't get all up in arms, and be considerate to them, because you don't know where they're coming from, what their background is, what their intentions are, and start with that sort of approach even before you engage in a dialogue with them. So for instance, looking at Japanese swords, there are oftentimes many different, if not ceremonies, many different conventions around how swords are used. Now, with Japanese swords in particular, there are many, many fans of Japanese swords, but not everyone who owns a Japanese sword or who picks up a Japanese sword necessarily wants to learn everything about Japanese culture or even the culture of using a sword. So if you see someone who has one, Shad's point was, you don't necessarily have to impose upon that person that you're now bound to follow the code of whatever you think someone who owns that sword needs to follow that sort of behavior. I do, however, encourage, you can see I have many different swords from many different cultures, and I personally do find it very fulfilling that if I am picking up a sword from a different culture, to learn as much about that culture and how the sword was used, what applications it was for, how the sword is to be displayed as possible. That helps me learn more about the sword, its application, and I learn more about their people and the past, and that personally for me is very fulfilling. But again, it's not necessarily for everyone. If someone wants to learn more about a katana and how it should be used, then for instance, we have Let's Ask Shogo. Go and check out his channel on YouTube, and he'll be more than happy to teach you the proper ways to properly respect the sword, for instance. So to that point, we'll bring up a quick question that Shad had about the displaying of different types of blade. So he was looking at katana, or more specifically uchikatana, the medium-sized blade, and he asked about how it should be displayed. And apparently he had a lot of criticism saying that it should never be displayed edge down because it could injure the blade. I completely agree with you, Shad. There's no indication from a just from an engineering perspective that is going to damage the blade. In fact, if we look at other cultures, for instance, if we look at Persian, Ottoman, Chinese, Indian swords, many of them are traditionally displayed with the edge facing down in their wooden scabbards, and it doesn't hurt the blade at all over time. And in fact, even within Japanese culture, if we look at different types of katana, if we go back to an earlier type of katana called a tachi, that the longer tachi is typically displayed edge down, as that's the position that is usually worn. The shorter uchi katana is instead worn edge up and displayed edge up. So if it's not from damaging the blade, then why is it done that way? It's done that way just because that's the orientation of the blade. It's the same way that if someone had a book, it has an obvious up and an obvious down. And if you saw someone with their book like this, you would say, you have your book upside down on the shelf. Now, if someone owns the book, they certainly can do it like that, but by the conventions of society, and Japan certainly enjoys following their rules, everyone's going to display it the appropriate direction, especially for something that has as much respect as a sword. So again, if you bought your katana with your hard-earned money, you can display it however you want. However, if you'd like to learn more about Japanese culture, you can look into what is the appropriate way to display it and in which time period. You'll find out that most of these rules came up during the peaceful Edo period rather than the medieval warlike Sengoku period. Anyway, that's all for now. We'll check in later. Keep up your good work, Shad and Matthew Jensen. Take care.